Okay, so welcome to this fifth episode of the Future of Information webinar. We have been starting a very exciting web series about the future of information management. And today is very special for several reasons. First, we have some very special guests, Julia Stettner and Maximilian Friedel from Allianz Technology. Julia is Allianz Technology Microsoft 365 Governance Service Manager, and Maxi is Allianz Technology SharePoint Online Product Owner. So we have been hosting a lot of leaders and numerous leaders from Microsoft, from other Microsoft partners. But today we actually have people which are leading an information initiative in the ground, in the field, with a large company. Before we get started, I wanted to pause for a moment to say that as an Israeli company, we really wanted to make this event happen and happen on time today, despite the fact that Israel is at war. And as an Israeli company, we really wanted to make the event happen today. Despite the fact that Israel is at war after a barbarian terrorist attack, our prayers are with the family of the victims, the family of the kidnapped civilians, and with the family of the Israeli soldiers. At Harmony, we will do our best to keep running the Harmony business as usual, because we believe that this is part of winning the war of against evil. Sorry for that. Okay. So this is really important for us to make this event happen on time, and this is also part of winning the war against evil. So thank you all for joining. So today we'll start with Maxi and Julia telling us about their experience leading one of the largest information management initiative worldwide, as they are leading an information management initiative for 180,000 users. So we'll talk about their compliance and the business units requirements. We'll talk about their architecture and their implementation. We'll even see a demo, including SharePoint Online and Harmony. And we will even talk about the future and how AI may improve their information management initiative to automate and simplify information management. Finally, we'll take your questions. And we have allocated 10 to 15 minutes to answer all of your questions. So please feel free to share questions in the Q&A window on your screen, on top of your screen. And also, you will get a link of the recording event. So this way, you don't need to take too many notes. You will get a link via email. So let's get going. So again, thank you, Maxi and Julia, to join us to tell and share your story with the community. So I would like to ask you first to tell us more about your role and your organization.
All right. Also from my end, a warm welcome, everyone. And I hand over to Julia first for her personal introduction, and then I take over.
Thank you so much, Thank you so much, Maxi and Jakob, also for the warm welcome. Yeah, my name is Julia. I'm the service manager for the information protection and governance in Allianz Technology, and I'm mainly driving the entire governance topic and information protection topic end to end, from collecting the business requirements over translating them into technical implementation, and in the end giving them back to the end users in a format that normal non-tech savvy end user can handle well. And with that, over to Max.
Thank you, Julia. And I'm Maximilian Friedl. I'm the product owner behind the service Julia mentioned, which includes not only SharePoint Online, but also other features in the information protection government topics around Office 365. But in today's presentation, especially for the focus topic today, we will discuss more about the SharePoint Online document management system we have built up. Some more background information about our organization. And Jakob, I think for that we can jump to the next slide quickly to just give you some digits and numbers. So we are both from Allianz Technology, which is the shared service provider for Allianz Group. So we build different services from the IT perspective for our organization, which is distributed across the country, globe in 52 different operational entities. We had in this whole project, which was running for now nearly 2 years, more than 200 people involved from different stakeholders, from our group holding Allianz SE and also from our OEs, which are using the platform so far. And overall target footprint for that whole platform would be 180,000 users, which are using Office 365, and a large amount of that users is already also enrolled and upgraded to the document management functionality. And that being said, over to you, Jakob, again.
Yeah, so thank you very much. So 52 business units or operating entities, how you call them. This is a very large scale. And 200 people which are managing this project. That's also very impressive. And 24 months, I know this is a time also we have been working with you. So this is quite a big initiative. What we wanted to talk about also is that we are talking to a lot of our enterprise customers, and they talk about requirements and the fact that a lot of times legal and compliance requirements are different and even clashing with the business units requirements. So as you have 52 business units here, a lot of time we see that the legal requirements are to delete and dispose as much as information as possible, while the business units, they want to maintain business continuity, and they tend to want to amass a huge amount of information and emails. So I think it's interesting to understand from you, Maxi, how you mitigate between these conflicting requirements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for the question. And that is basically also linked to what I've shared about who was involved in that whole journey. So it's a collaborative approach between us from the IT provider side. So we take care of the IT requirements to build the platforms. But it's more than that. So for instance, what do we need to consider is global standards, local laws, and also regulatory requirements. So especially in the insurance and finance sector, we have strict and very strong regulatory units in different countries. So one example would be BaFin in Germany or FINRA in North America, for instance, which are really having not just IT requirements, but also regulatory and legal requirements in terms of data information protection. And another point, especially here in Europe, is the GDPR to protect private information and to make sure that information is not kept if it's no longer required. And as you mentioned, it's clashing sometimes with the business requirements. So that is one of the challenges we had to undergo and agree on a group level. So the overall requirements were defined in our holding by our legal unit there. to come to a compromise and to an overall setup of requirements and definitions, which would be the standard set on a global level, meaning defining a global standard, which is defined more or less on BaFin and regulatory requirements coming in. But as you also mentioned, retention versus deletion. If the group says everything should be deleted in a timely manner, dependent on GDPR requirements, at the same time, we have also legal requirements to retain information, which is relevant from a legal point of view. So that's the so-called record management, which comes into play. And to avoid that it's a clash, our task within Allianz Technology was also to come up with a technical solution, which on the one hand side makes sure that deletions can happen in a timely manner, dependent on when they need to be deleted, but at the same time that the retention of the respective data is possible based on the business requirements. And all that, and that's the last part here, to make sure that also our users, means all the employees, first of all, understand how to do it, why to do it, and to provide them with tools which are more user-friendly than they were used to in the past, because all these topics around data retention and automated deletions is somehow new to most of our organizations. I think in the last 20 to 30 years, either we had paper archives for sure to store the relevant information, or we have business systems for sure in our environment where the actual customer data is stored, and there it's all clear there is respective GDPR regulatory in place for many years. But now it's just also for especially email related information which needs to be archived or deleted in timely manner, because every email contains personal information, and therefore we had to find a solution there which is user-friendly, integrated. And before we come to the technical parts, just as a brief insight, how we try to tackle it. So there's retention and there's also disposition or deletion of data. And as mentioned, legal requirements come into play to make sure that everything is kept what our regulator asks us to keep, or which other legal units in the different countries ask the different units of our organization to keep. So like contracts need to be kept for a certain amount of time. Board decisions need to be kept for a certain amount of time. Workers' council information and communication might need to be stored for a legal relevant period, and so on. And also to make sure that the data privacy is ensured there. And at the same time, on the other side, we also need to make sure that everything which is not required to be kept needs to be deleted. But as you mentioned, business requirements, business continuity is the other side of the medal, I would say, because sometimes, and that was the biggest clash over the past 2 years, the rules which are maybe applied on group level might be stricter than some of our units might need it. So it could be that in France or in Australia, there are different regulatory requirements, maybe asking for keeping stuff longer than the EU, for instance, says us to delete data. And also there it's sometimes difficult. Sometimes there's not even a definition for the retention or deletion period for some of the data. So that's something which had to be aligned. And then the last part, IT requirements. First of all, information security has to be ensured. If we retain data for a legal period, we also need to make sure that only those users have access to it which really are authorized for it. So we need to have processes behind of that. As we are talking about long-term retention, processes need to be in place that the access rights are maintained over a longer time. And the other side, that's more from the disposition point of view, of course, deleting data, especially for instance on file shares, means reduction of storage costs if we talk about old worlds. So that was one technical aspect we had in mind as well.
Yeah, so thank you. This is really interesting, Maxi, because I think here we see clearly 3 sets of requirements, which are not so easy to combine. You have, maybe we start with the business requirements to summarize what you said, which is where record management happen, right? To make business continuity, to be able to keep contracts, to be able to keep communication via emails with suppliers, with customers. So you want to keep some critical communication. And this is actually, this is up to the business user and the business unit to define what needs to be kept, right? Maxi?
Yep, sorry, I had some audio issues. Can you please repeat it?
Yeah, I was saying that for the business requirements, what needs to be kept for business continuity is a business decision down to the owner of the document.
Exactly. And these users or employees are in the end the information owner. So they created the content, they created maybe the respective documents, or they at least are the respective legal owner of the information within one of our OEs, within a department, and therefore would be accountable for the information.
So we will see in the demo how you made it easy. You talked a lot about in order to get acceptance from the business units, it's not enough today to just say you have to do it. This is a corporate mandate. We know that end user today needs to be engaged, and you can't really enforce a policy, but you need to get them to adhere and understand the why, as you mentioned, why the company is doing it, and to make it easy, not a burden. It's also interesting to see that more and more the legal requirements for protecting data privacy is specifically about maintaining retention and disposition at the right time. That's also a very important principle, I think, here. And also you want to, I was talking to chief legal officer, which were explaining the more data you keep, in particular for large enterprise, the more liabilities you accumulate. This is true for a lot of businesses. They don't want to have to answer they don't want to be asked to give data which is redundant and have to handle create liabilities. So that's really interesting. And then I think IT also making sure that you don't amass too much information, because the more you keep information, the more liability you keep. Also, if you have an intrusion, the more information you have there, the more critical the intrusion can be. So that's also really interesting. So thank you for really giving us a big picture of this free set of requirements. And I think the next thing is really how you guys came up with the right architecture and implementation to implement across multiple countries and multiple business units. How did you implement it? So maybe you can tell us more about the implementation.
Yes, of course. And before we jump to the technical deep dive with Julia, just a brief overview, because as mentioned, I think also in the invitation, so one of the key aspects we are using here is SharePoint Online, means Office 365 or M365, how it's now called. Microsoft 365 offers various different license packages which can be used to do more security and compliance related topics, and to make sure that information is protected and that there's some more governance in the tenant. And that's what we made use of it. We have, as mentioned, as we are the shared service provider, we have created a service which we call the Information Protection Governance Service, built on the M365 E5 IPG license pack, which covers various aspects for data protection, security, but mainly also, and that was the initial part for it, the ASIDM, means for our Allianz standard for information and document management standard, a compliant digital archiving system. And that's the part where we will deep dive now in the next few minutes with Julia. So one part of it is SharePoint DMS, how we call it. And then, of course, also for retaining and archiving emails, we have Harmony as integration into Outlook. And then, that being said, switching over to Julia to show us and talk a little bit more about the technology.
So on the next slide, we can see the application set that we offer within Allianz to facilitate the retention and, first of all, storing documents. and for that, we use SharePoint. Within Allianz, the users have the option to either create so-called SharePoint basic sites, which cover more the collaborative part of document management. So you could upload your files there to collaborate with them together with your team, with your colleagues from the department. And files would get deleted after 6 years on those SharePoint basic sites. You have the option to manually retain them a bit longer. And on the other hand, we have our SharePoint DMS sites, which are the compliant digital archiving sites within Allianz. Now, while both SharePoint types are can be combined or integrated with the Harmony Outlook add-in to upload emails and email attachments to the connected SharePoint site. The SharePoint DMS sites are really the go-to point for the end users to perform compliant digital archiving that meets the regulatory requirements. SharePoint DMS sites come with an extended set of metadata that allow the user to classify the uploaded files or emails with some extensions that describe the content of the file. In addition, and that's the big benefit of the SharePoint DMS sites, we have an extended capability for retention and records management. And users really benefit from an automatic retention labeling on those SharePoint DMS sites. Automatic retention labeling means the users provide certain metadata tags to an uploaded file, and based on the metadata tags that the user provided, an automatic job that regularly runs in the backend automatically decides, instead of the end user, how long this particular file needs to be retained, how long it needs to be protected, and when it eventually needs to be deleted.
So that's really interesting. What you're describing is that you have basically basic sites which are for collaboration, and there is not much metadata, right?
Right, it has a basic set of metadata, but it's not mandatory to use them. So you could use them if it supports your information architecture on the SharePoint side, but it's not mandatory to.
Yeah,
so these are really kept basic.
The business units. The business units will decide if they want to put metadata.
Right.
Yeah. And do you have any thinking moving this SharePoint Online basic sites for collaboration to Teams to benefit from chat and functionality like that?
So you can optionally build a team in front of such a SharePoint basic site, but also in front of a SharePoint DMS site. So Teams is an optional construct which you can have in front of both SharePoint site types.
Very interesting. So, and then only in the DMS, so you have this separation between collaboration and digital archiving with automatic record and retention labeling. Okay.
Right.
Very interesting architecture. And Harmony give you access to both, basically.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, I would directly jump to the demo to show you the ideal archiving journey for the end users. On the next slide, we can see it somehow visualized on two different paths, which I will show you both. Within Allianz, most end users use the browser interface to upload their normal documents, like PowerPoint, Word, Excel files, into SharePoint, whereas Harmony as an Outlook plugin is used to upload and archive emails. So I will now show you both the SharePoint interaction as well as the Harmony interaction. To quickly guide you along this path, or these two paths, so we would start with the creation of a container then upload the files, classify them, and finally close the container again to say this automatic job that's running in the backend that the final retention period for the files inside the container should start. And with that, I will share my screen. I hope you're able to see it.
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. So this is a SharePoint DMS site that I prepared up front or ordered up front. And as you've seen on the slide, the journey starts with the creation of what we call a dossier. We use the document set content type in SharePoint, and who maybe knows about document sets, you can think of it as a folder with the option to add metadata to it. So when our users create a new dossier, they need to provide a couple of information about this container. And typically, when you create a new container for files that belong to the same subject, you would mark it initially as open. So it means the files inside are still ongoing. The subject is not yet closed.
And so this is a document set. It looks like a folder for the user, but in additional, you said you have metadata, which typically you don't have on a folder. So it's really implemented with a SharePoint document set, right?
Right. So we decided to do so in order to facilitate a better searchability of content. So you could, for example, search for files that are owned by a particular person. So now we created this document set, and users now can start to just drag and drop files from wherever file location. Sorry. Just drag and drop their files into SharePoint. Now the next step for the end users is to classify the files based on the category or content of the files. So if they want to archive a file for a regulatory reason, then the first step is to classify the file as relevant document, which is done via the content type. Along with that, they can see an additional metadata field popping up, which is the document class. And document classes come from our group standard for information and document management. And they contain a list of several document classes, and each of those document classes is associated to a defined retention period. So business letters might need to be kept longer than, or maybe shorter than, for example, a corporate rule. So the user would provide a tag to this file. And now the file is classified as relevant, and the sort of file is a business letter. Now, when the subject of this dossier is closed, the user just needs to go back to the metadata of the dossier and change the dossier status from open to closed. Changing the dossier status to closed triggers the automatic retention labeling to start running in the backend. And within a time of around 7 days, the automatism would provide the correct retention label to this file. Means the end user doesn't need to know and doesn't need to think about how long do I need to retain a business letter. Is it 10 years? Is it 20 years? Is it for indefinite? Because the automatism really applies the correct label based on the metadata classification that the user provided to this file.
So rather than asking the users to define a retention period, and you are abstracting that by saying you don't need to worry about the retention period, this is something Allianz Group Corporate is defining with legal, and all they need to say is what type of business document is this. If it's a relevant document, so then they choose from the list of document type, and that's how the retention is automatically defined.
Correct. Yeah. And in this demo dossier, which I created some weeks earlier, you can see how it then looks in the end. So files that are classified as relevant, either an email or relevant document, with a respective document class, will receive the retention or record label, which is defined in the retention schedule. So for those two items, it was record 10 years. And those files are now protected not only against manual deletion, but also against changing any metadata or the content of the file itself. So when we now go into Outlook, I will quickly show you how it looks from the Harmony perspective. Obviously,
so maybe just to let everybody know, Harmony is Outlook plugin. So you are within Outlook, and you are using the plugin to access your SharePoint sites. Harmony gives you access to all your SharePoint locations, to all your Microsoft Teams locations, and your OneDrive locations, just to give the perspective of Harmony.
Yeah, so I connected my SharePoint site that you've just seen in the browser to Harmony. So now I am able to access what I actually see in the browser just via this sidebar in Outlook. So this is just the same as I would see in the SharePoint browser view. You can see this Harmony demo dossier that I just created in the browser. And I can now do the same archiving journey for emails as well. So I can just pick an email and move it into my Harmony sidebar. We configured Harmony in a way that it automatically detects emails as relevant emails whenever they are uploaded via Harmony. The reason for this is that we actually want the user to only upload their relevant emails and not emails that are not relevant from a legal or business perspective. And with that, they just need to select the appropriate document class, as they did for normal documents as well. Save it, and the email is now uploaded into SharePoint, into my dossier, and is archived properly. I can do the same for email attachments. So whenever I receive any file format as an attachment to an email, I can also just drag and drop that file into the sidebar. Again, as you've seen in the browser view, I need to select a content type for this uploaded file. So in this case, I say it's a relevant document. And just the same as in the browser or for an email, I need to provide a document class. And now actually all the functionality of SharePoint applies to those files. As mentioned, Harmony is just another view into SharePoint. And with that, I'm at the end of my demo.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you very much. And basically, Harmony is learning on the fly. You don't need to set up anything about telling him about the metadata. If you change the metadata on SharePoint, is there anything you need to do with Harmony?
No, because it just retrieves the information from the SharePoint setup.
Okay, great. And what's the impact of Harmony on with the user community? Why is it better to have an Outlook plugin rather than just the browser?
So one of our requirements to be fulfilled from a legal perspective was that the email metadata are visible in SharePoint. So what we do, or what basically the core feature that we use within Harmony is that all the email metadata information, like the sender, recipient, sent date, subject, and so on, are extracted out of the message and written into SharePoint columns. And that again improves the searchability of your emails, so that you could easily search for emails sent at a certain date, for example, just by using the normal SharePoint search, which is much more end user friendly than opening each and every email file within SharePoint and trying to identify the sent date from there.
So the ability really that Harmony automatically map email headers to SharePoint columns, which enable you after that to really classify email and search by sender or by date and so on.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you. And with that, we wanted to talk also about what were the challenges in this journey. This is a long journey, where you are in this journey, and what did you learn? What was we always learn more from challenges than from successes. So maybe you can share that with us also.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sure. And that I would take over again. And over the course, as mentioned, we are working on that topic, at least from a technical point of view, for more than 2 years. But the whole journey started already in 2018 when this whole ASIDM group corporate rule was defined and released for our organization. And there was a timeline given within 3 years to find ways how to archive emails, especially, and to find retention and deletion policies there. The first challenge was there was already an archiving system for unstructured data from file shares, like regular documents stored on file shares or emails shared from the past. But in the past, it was more a specific specialist tool for our legal departments in some of our OEs, which have dealt for the last years already with such requirements, but it was not a tool which was suitable for a user base of more than 180,000 users. It was based on FileNet and was really, from a user experience point of view, not that easy to understand from a regular employee level. And it also did not fulfill our global requirements. It was hosted mostly in the European area, but it was nothing we can easily roll out on global scale. Therefore, we had to check for different approaches. Our answer to that, first of all, was then the introduction of the Office 365 service. So we can maybe jump to the next animation. Yes. And when we introduced Office 365 in 2019 and 2020, also with a huge acceleration caused by the pandemic for sure. And meanwhile, we have more than 185,000 users rolled out to Office 365. The full focus was mainly on collaboration, on sharing, on collaborating, on documents in the Office 365 area. The main focus for also switching to it was mainly driven from a cost perspective to reduce the on-premise storage cost for file shares and so on. But the requirements back then were not yet in the area of retention and deletion of data and to perform record management. And also, that being said, there was no license available yet in that time from Microsoft end, which was suitable for us from a cost perspective also to come up with such technology enhancements on Office 365. And that was changed in 2020 when Microsoft decided to change the license setup of the E5 license to allow the purchase of separate packages like the IPG enhancement, which we did. And this enabled us to design and build a service, which we call IPG service, and including the enhancement of SharePoint with the document management system functionality. That was the design phase. Of course, technically, everything is evaluated, tested, and so on. But the most critical part is such a system has to be compliant with the legal requirements. And therefore, a legal assessment had to be done for a longer period, which took us nearly 5 months last year, with exhaustive alignments also with external legal parties to check if all the regulatory requirements are fulfilled, if our own corporate rules are fulfilled, and everything is fine, not just from a technical, but also from a compliance point of view. And last but not least, we received the respective go-live approval mid of last year. And so far, we have rolled out 135,000 users out of our 185,000 Office 365 users to the platform, with more to come until mid of next year. And that is basically the biggest challenge right now, to not just enable the users technically, but also to drive the change and adoption. Because we, as a shared service provider, of course, we provide a technical solution, but to make the adoption within each and every of our organizations of the operational units takes time, and it takes also time to make the users understand why this has to be done. Because as mentioned, the old archiving system was for special users which are in the legal field, which know there are regulatory requirements for years and which have to do all that stuff on a daily basis. But for the majority of our user base, that is something completely new, so that they have to take care of, okay, I received an email maybe 2 years ago, which is relevant for my company, not just for me personally, but relevant for the company from a legal point of view. So where do I have to put it now to avoid that it's getting deleted? And all that is driven with extensive training, not just from technical point of view, but also from the organizational point of view, with the understanding of the corporate rule which was going out.
So you're saying, Maxi, that really user adoption and user experience, actually it started in 2019 with the challenge of having an archiving solution which didn't provide the right user experience, the right user interface. And then you are saying today also your main motivation is user interface. So one of the things we have been looking at Harmony is first facilitating user experience with a sidebar within Outlook, so to avoid the toggling across applications, making it easy for users to drag and drop emails directly from Outlook. But the other aspect, to get the next step, ideally, information management should be totally transparent and add zero burden on the user. So one of the things we have been exploring the past couple of months is how can we use the advances in AI, the AI advances, and with the large language models to actually automate a lot of the information management. Is that something that you see in the future which would be of interest for Allianz Technology?
Yes, indeed. And that's also one part and one aspect we have defined for our overall strategy and roadmap. Because as you mentioned, change and adoption is one thing, user trainings is the other thing. But it's always challenging that users are next to the daily use or daily duties they do on their regular job. Now they get another task which may consume a certain amount of time during their week, during their months, and that's sometimes not available. And it's also very difficult for most of the users to take the right decision, where to put a certain document for archiving, how long. So we try to simplify that, of course, with the automation, with applying the labels, for instance, and take the decision how long it needs to be retained. But to take the decision, okay, this email or that document now needs to be moved to the archiving system, still has to be done by the employee themselves. And in some cases that works fine. In some cases it's maybe difficult. And in some cases, maybe the users do not even know if an email or a document needs to be retained for a longer period, because maybe they didn't make up their mind that they maybe have dealt with the relevant information overall. Therefore, AI could help there a lot, because you can first of all learn from others. AI is trained usually. It's like the large language models from the experiences from experts in our organization, which maybe do that on a daily basis and can maybe predict over time which documents might be of which document class and might be needed to be archived. And that could be something we could, on the long run, add to our product so that the users not always have to take the decision on their own, or at least are supported with taking the right decision.
Okay, yeah, I think as we discussed before, we shared the same vision of really making it easy for the user. And one of the things we have been really looking at Harmony is when you look at any compliance initiative, it's very hard to engage the users. And typically, you're going to get only 10% of early adopters, the user in your organization, which will really be sensitive to this information management initiative. Sometimes it's legal, sometimes IT is also early adopters. Sometimes you have a business unit. So what we are looking at in our strategy for AI to facilitate information management is to leverage this 10% early adopter to actually train the model. So because this way the model can be trained, you can learn from the 10% users, and then you can start prompting the 90%, which are maybe passive right now. You can prompt them to say, hey, this email should be saved in this place. Go ahead and do it. Is that something you think it makes sense to rely on the early adopters to say what they are doing is actually a good behavior? We can assume it's a good behavior because typically you don't really know. There is no real audit trail, and you just assume that these early adopters are doing the same thing, and you can push the rest of the organization to mimic them. That makes sense?
Yes, of course. It's one of the aspects when using such AI tools, for sure, because early adopters usually are the ones which are feeling confident to use it, and which maybe already are in the position to take the right decision on their own, and therefore, of course, their experience can help the organization to take the right decisions. But as always, and I think that's also in general the overall discussion we also have internally about AI, of course, it has to be reviewed afterwards if the decision proposed to the users is the right one. So that's also in general for AI the general rule, to review what was proposed to make sure that you don't 100% rely on it, but it can definitely make a difference, and especially the early adopters play a huge role.
Yeah, what's interesting also is that the machine can learn from the machine gave a recommendation, and if the user has ignored it, so then the machine can learn, or if the user have accepted it and has moved. So basically, you start from semi-automation where you only recommend to the user, and this way the machine can get better based on it's like reinforced training. And then eventually you may be able to get to full automation, but having this intermediate period when you only prompt the user with a recommendation and then learn if it makes sense from the user, you can then, the machine can adapt and learn a second time with reinforced training. Okay, good. So maybe let's move to Q&A. We have questions from the audience. Maya, can you take us through that?
Yes, thank you, Jakob. First question is for Julia or Maxi. What third-party tools do you use for archiving?
Maybe Julia?
Yeah, so actually it's just Harmony that we use for email archiving. apart from that, we use M365 as a bundle, and here SharePoint is the application we use for storing files that need to be archived.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if you want to start to trial Harmony, feel free to go to the Harmony website, harmon.ie, and there you will find a free trial button, and you can simply click on it, and you get a free 30 days evaluation.
Thanks, Yaakov. Another question for Maxi and Julia. Why do you need 2 SharePoint sites? I think they are talking about a basic site versus
so we have the SharePoint DMS site as a site type which comes with an enhanced set of metadata, as I've just showed you. And this might not always be appropriate, or might be an overhead if you just want to store day-to-day files that you collaborate on, that you maybe create for as a project draft or whatever. So files which don't require archiving from a legal perspective don't actually need to be classified with all these metadata. So that's one reason we wanted to spare the end users the overhead of this entire classification process for files which can be deleted after 6 years anyways. The second thing is that we have different retention capabilities on those 2 sites. So on the SharePoint basic sites, we have a regular deletion of 6 years for content, unless it is manually labeled with a retention label to keep it for 10 years instead. And on SharePoint basics, on SharePoint DMS sites, we have this automatism that, first of all, automatically applies labels, and secondly, offers an enhanced set of record periods. So not just only 10 years, but indefinite and whatever our other customers require. So we have 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 6 years, whatever. So yeah, that's why we have this distinguishment to meet different requirements with regards to classification, but also with regards to retention requirements.
Okay, thank you.
And just adding on that part, just one last comment, and it's also a licensing thing. So all the automated features which we have demonstrated are part of the E5 IPG license pack. And as also outlined, not all our OEs are yet enrolled to this enhancement. So some of them are still just using the E3 license pack from Microsoft, which only allows to use the normal collaboration spaces. That's also one of the reasons why we have a split and offered both options.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Next question is for Yaakov. For AI, will you need to transfer the customer emails to your cloud, to the Harmony cloud?
Absolutely not. So one of the things we have learned working with enterprises like Allianz is they don't like their data to leave their tenant. So everything we are doing at Harmony, we are keeping emails in the customer tenant. And even our new Harmony, we have a new Harmony now that you can see in the Microsoft Store, which is a totally cloud-based client. But even with this new client, we are not transferring any emails to outside the tenant of the customer. So that's a very important design principle for everything we do. And the AI model will be installed on the tenant of the organization. The training will be organization specific, and the recommendation will also be organization specific.
Okay, thank you. Next question for Maxi and Julia. What was your adoption strategy? Training, videos, how do you market to your business users?
Do you want to take it, Maxi, or?
Can you please repeat it? Just had a call.
Yeah, what was your adoption strategy? Did you do training or videos? How do you market to your business users?
Yeah, so it's a split approach. First of all, as outlined, we as shared provider, we provide a technology basis. So we create a set of user material from a technical point of view to explain how the solution works. The actual distribution and communication to users is driven in our different OEs. And that's also served with a central training, which was set up with not just a technical onboarding, but also an onboarding to the AS/ITM standard. Means our group training academy has set up virtual trainings, which are more or less mandatory for the users to undergo during the onboarding phase. And that contains, first of all, the onboarding to the regulatory requirements to make everyone understand the why. And the second part is the technical onboarding to SharePoint DMS. And that's served with the material we create from our end, but can be adapted in each OE dependent on the requirements in each business unit, because everyone has different business models in our organization. Everyone has different units, and so every user group might need to be tackled in a different way to do the adoption.
Okay, thank you. And we have time for one last question. This is a question for you, Yaakov. When can we start testing Harmony's AI features?
So we have a design partner program where we are starting to work with enterprises to really test our recommendations. So feel free to contact us if you are interested to be part of this program. So thank you very much, Maxi and Julia, for sharing with the community so much information about your initiative. Good luck in the continued path in your journey. And thank you, everybody, for joining and for your questions. We will see you in the next Harmony information, the future of the information management event. Thank you all.
Thank you for having us. Have a great rest of the day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.